My friend, what I'm going to speak about now is probably one of the most important topics that you're ever going to learn, which is literally going to decide how good or how bad a programmer you're going to be. And that topic is none other than object orientation. Now, object orientation is a combination of two words, object being one, orientation being the other. Now, to understand the meaning of object orientation from a computer science point of view, first we should not understand it from the point of view of computer science. First, let us understand it from the point of view of the world we are living in, the real world. Yes? What do you mean, sir, you may ask? Let me explain. First of all, ignore this word object. Focus only on the word orientation. Now, let us assume I went to a dictionary, and in the pages of the dictionary, I searched for the meaning of the word called as orientation. Now, do you know what will be written in the dictionary? In the dictionary, the meaning of the word orientation will be something like way of looking. What will the dictionary say? Orientation means way of looking, it says. Another best word that the dictionary suggests is a word called as perspective. So, dictionary is saying orientation's meaning means the way you look at something or your perspective. Now, what do you mean by this? This should go inside your head. What do you mean by perspective? What do you mean by way of looking? See, please understand, in Hindi and Kannada, we have a word called as drishti kona, perspective. Yes? I am not quite sure what you may call that in Tamil or Malayalam or Marathi or other languages, I don't know. But drishti kona means perspective, how you look at the world. Now, what do you mean by this? This should become very clear to all of you. So, let us assume I am now going to keep one glass of water here. And let us assume I'll fill this glass of water only half with water. So, it's a half filled glass of water. Now, this same glass of water, friend, I am going to keep it in front of different people. And though the glass of water is same, the way of looking of each individual will not be the same. Don't believe me? Let us see, okay? So let us assume I'll take this glass of water and first keep it in front of the first person who is a chemist. Now, who is a chemist, if you ask me? A person who's spending their life in a laboratory, yes, completely with test tubes, chemicals, this. So I'm talking about a chemist who's deep into chemistry. And if I ask, what do you see? Suddenly the chemist will be like, what do you mean, what do I see? I see half liquid, half gas. Correct? Where there is water is liquid, where there is no water it's gas only, half liquid, half gas. And that is how they look at the glass, that is their way of looking, that is their perspective, that is their orientation. If you still didn't understand, let's remove the chemist and bring a person called as an optimist. Now in English, the meaning of an optimist is a person who is always joyful, always happy, only sees the good in things, doesn't care about the bad, only sees positives and not negatives. Correct? Now this jolly person, if I ask them, what do you see? They are so happy in life, they'll be like, I see a half full glass of water. That is how they look at it, half full glass of water. Right? Great. Thank you. Next, I'm going to call one more person who's the opposite of an optimist. Let us call this person as a pessimist. Pessimist only means a person who is always sad. Okay? Look, they are such people. I'm sure in your group of friends also you will have optimists and pessimists. A pessimist is a person who always has a problem with everything in life. For example, sun rises, problem. Rain falls, problem. Correct? No job, problem. Job, full problem. These kind of people will never be happy in life, and such people are only called as pessimists. There is a word in English, go tell your friend, hey, you're a pessimist. Understood? Anyways, please try to understand, friends. If I keep this glass of water in front of a pessimist and ask, what do you see? Now a pessimist will be like, what do you mean, what do I see? What I see is a half empty glass of water. So their way of looking is, it is half empty. But the other person's way of looking at the glass was, it is half full. So do you see, both are looking at the same glass, but the way of looking is different. Their perspective is different. Their orientation is different. Even now, if you didn't understand, let us assume I keep it in front of a realist. Now, who is a realist? A person who's neither optimistic nor pessimistic. Not too positive, not even too negative. Middle, neutral. Now, if I ask, what do you see? What will they say? What do you mean, what do you see? I see one simple glass of water. Correct, that is also correct, just a glass of water. Yes or no? And now there is one more group, especially if you come to where I live, Bangalore, you know. Bangalore is super famous for its pubs. I know it's unfortunate, but pubs are the most profitable businesses in Bangalore, and it has the highest number of pubs, right? After 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in Bangalore during weekends, if you go to a pub, you will find a different category of people for whom gravity doesn't work correctly, you know. They'll be going little wobbly. If you keep this glass of water in front of such a person and ask, what do you see? He'll be like, I see the glass of water, correct, but where is the main ingredient, they will ask. So don't go and ask such people. Irrespective, I hope everybody understood that though the glass of water was the same, each and every one of these people were looking at the same glass of water differently. And that is the meaning of orientation or perspective or way of looking. Yes, I hope all of you understood the meaning of this word called as orientation. Correct? Now, what do you mean by object orientation is the question. Yes, now let's combine both. Please try to understand. Now, if I take the same glass of water and now I bring one more person in front who is a Java developer, which is what everyone attending this class has an ultimate ambition of becoming, a developer in the industry. And if I were to ask this Java developer, what do you see? Please understand, starting from today, if you want to be a successful Java developer, doesn't matter what I keep in front of you. It could be a glass of water or a pen or a pencil or a phone or a clock or whatever I keep in front of you, right? 100% when I ask, what do you see? Even if it is a glass of water, your answer should be, what I see, sir, is an object. What do you see? Object. And yes, a glass of water is an object. Correct or not? That way, look at everything around you. Now, this classroom that you're sitting in, don't you think everything in your classroom is an object? Yes? Teacher object, student object, bag object, pen object, book object, camera object, phone object, light object, AC object, speaker object. Friends, the day you start looking at everything around you as a collection of objects, then you can say that you are object oriented. That you are object oriented. And please try to understand, if you don't agree with me, think about it. The city that we live in, what is a city? A collection of lakhs and crores of objects. Road object, bike object, auto object, bus object, car object, flyover object, metro object. Yes or no? Why all that? Zoom out of this city. You are now living in a country. City is part of the country. What is your country? It is just another object. Country is an object. Or don't believe me? Zoom out even more. Country is part of this larger blue color planet which we call as planet Earth. Yes? And Earth is also an object. Zoom out even more. Earth is just an object in the solar system. Zoom out even more. Solar system is just another object in what you call as your Milky Way galaxy. Your galaxy, if I zoom out even more, is just an object in what you call as your universe. Yes? Which means, what is wrong in me saying that world is a collection of objects? World is a collection of objects. And the day you start looking at everything in the world as a collection of objects, then you can say that you are object oriented. Anyways, what I am trying to say is that world is a collection of objects. And if anybody starting from today in any interview asks you what is object orientation, no hi-fi answer, simple practical answer. Object orientation is the perspective of looking at this world around us as what? A collection of objects. I hope everybody understood. Since the first rule of object orientation is clear to everybody. And what is the first rule? That the world is a collection of objects, and that is the first rule, right? Now please try to understand, object orientation, if you want to start, there are totally 3 rules you should understand. Now listen to the second rule carefully. Don't you think mobile is also nothing but one object only? Don't you think a laptop is also nothing but an object only? Don't you think even a desktop is also an object only? World is only a collection of objects, means all these guys are also objects only. Now think logically and answer, okay? Don't you think every object in this world compulsorily will belong to one type or category? Sir, we didn't understand. What do you mean by type or category? Think logically and answer. If I ask you mobile, laptop, desktop, what is the type it belongs to? What will you say? Anybody with common sense will say either electronic device or computer. I know some of you are saying electronic device, but my problem is light is also an electronic device. This remote is also an electronic device. Yes, everything is an electronic device. AC is also an electronic device. But if you be a little more specific, what is a mobile, laptop and desktop? All of them belong to one type called as computer. I hope you are able to understand. Friends, every object in this world belongs to one type. Compulsorily. If you don't believe, let me give you one more example. Now, please understand, we have different cars in the world. For example, there is one type of car which people call as hatchback cars. Basically, it will not have that bumper, hatchback. Correct? Example, I-20, Swift, all these are hatchback cars. Also, we have another set of cars called as sports cars. Yes or no? Your Ferrari, Lamborghini, all these are what? Sports car. And of course, you have your electric cars. Example, this Tata Nexon EV, Tesla, what are all these? Electric cars. Now please try to understand, irrespective of what is the car. If I ask you what is the type it belongs to, don't you think all of you would agree they all belong to one type called as car? And that is what I am also telling, my dear friends. Every object in this world will compulsorily belong to one type or category. Compulsorily. If you don't believe me, let me give you one more example, okay? For example, now, if I bring one microscope, and through the microscope, if I look at this classroom, more than students and human beings, I will see one world of microorganisms. Yes or no? And they are also objects. Just because your eyes don't see doesn't mean they are not objects. Right? Now, don't you think a cold virus is also an object? Don't you think 100% an Ebola virus is also an object only? Don't you think, and of course, how can we forget our world famous superhero coronavirus? Yes, they are also objects only. Now, please try to understand. If I ask you what is the type they belong to, what will be your answer? Now everybody will confidently answer, sir, the type is virus. I think you got my point. Every object in this world, microscopic or macroscopic, micro or macro, both are objects. I hope you understood. And I give you totally 3 examples. Type computer, type car, type virus. Every object in this world belongs to a type. But the rule is not complete. The rule has a second part which you have to listen to me carefully, otherwise you will not understand. See, please understand, like how world is a collection of objects, your Java program also, once we start coding, you will realize is nothing but a collection of objects. Your Java program is also a collection of objects. You will realize it very soon. Second thing is, in Java also, like the world, every object will belong to a type. 100% every object will belong to a type. Now, what you call as type, please try to understand, is only in your head. What you call as type is only in your head. In other words, what you call as type is imaginary. It is just imagination. Sir, we didn't understand. What do you mean by it is just imagination, sir, you may ask. Let me give you an example. Assume I ask one of you, can you please give me a mobile object? Immediately some of you will put your hand inside your pocket, take your mobile and give it to me. Sir, take sir, mobile. Okay, don't give, I don't want. But you will give if I ask, yes? Now, if I ask you, okay, tell me friend, you gave me a mobile object, but what is the type it belongs to? Immediately you guys will say computer. Now I will be like, I don't want object, I want type. Try how much ever you want. You will never be able to give me this type. You may give me your friend's mobile, which is another computer or which is another object, or you may give your laptop, which is another object, but you will never give me this type, because type is only in your head, imaginary. What is real is objects of the type. If I ask you to bring one car, you may bring a hatchback car object. But if I ask you what is the type it belongs to, you will say car. If I say I don't want object, give me type, in your life you can't give me. Because type is imaginary, but objects of the type are real. So please try to understand, this type is only imaginary. Objects are real. And in Java, in programming, in object orientation, type is not called as type. The technical word is class. So, world is a collection of objects. Rule number 1. Every object belongs to a type, but type is imaginary. What is real is objects of the type. And in Java also very soon you will realize a Java program is a collection of objects. Second thing you will realize, in Java also every object belongs to a type, but we will not call it as type, we will call it as class. Class is imaginary, objects of the class are real. Now it's time for you guys to understand the third and final rule of object orientation. Now try to understand. If you treat everything as an object, right? If you consider anything as an object, if you say, sir, this is an object, then please try to understand, object means compulsorily every object in this world. You, me, camera, TV, light, AC, everything will have two parts. First one is called as the state of properties. Second part an object will have is technically called as its behavior. Sir, what do you mean by state of properties and behavior, sir? We didn't understand. Don't worry, I'll explain. In simple English, if you want to say, state of properties you can technically call it as has. This behavior part you can technically call it as does. What an object has, what an object does. Sir, didn't understand. Let's explore, okay? Let's take one example. It'll give you more clarity. Let's take the example of a car object. Car is also an object only. If it is an object, 100% it will also have two parts. One is state and properties, and the other part it will have is its behavior. In simple words, state of properties we call it as has, correct? In simple words we call behavior as does. So this is has and that is does. Clear till here? Now please try to understand one thing, right? If you want to understand what this has and does, or state and properties and behavior means, let us take the example of a car, okay? Now don't you think car as an object has colors? There is a blue color car, there is a red color car, there is a black color car. Yes, car has colors. One more thing, every car will have a name. I-20, Swift, Thar, all these are names of the car. Don't you think every car has a certain number of seats? Some cars will be 2-seaters, some car will be 4-seaters, some car will be 6-seaters. Yes or no? Like that, don't you think every car will have a certain top speed that the car can go to? Now, what is all this, friend? This is only called as properties. I hope you will understand. Name is a property. Cost is a property. 12 lakhs, 18 lakhs, 50 lakhs, 75 lakhs. Yes? Don't you think mileage is a property? How much mileage will give you? 12 kilometers per liter, 18 kilometers per liter, 6 kilometers per liter. Like that you can keep listing how much ever you want. For example's sake, I'm stopping at 3. Hope you understand. This is only called as has, which is in technical language called as state, also known as property. Every object will have something. Yes? But don't you think a car can perform some behaviors also, right? For example, let me just remove this. Let me explain to you what do you mean by behaviors. Now, think logically. You are sitting inside a car. Now, don't you think you can start a car? You can stop a car. What is starting and stopping? It's an action or behavior. Don't you think you can accelerate? Don't you think you can change gear? Don't you think you can switch on your AC, switch off your AC, increase temperature, decrease temperature? Friend, what is all this? All these are nothing but actions, and that is what I am also showing you. This is only called as behavior. This is only called as behavior. Starting is a behavior. Stopping is a behavior. Accelerating is a behavior. I hope you're able to understand. This is called as behavior. Changing gear is a behavior. Reverse is a behavior. Correct? Why all that? Radio is a behavior. Putting window up is a behavior. Putting window down is a behavior. These are called as behavior, also known as does. Take any object in this world. It will have something, it can do something. Has, does. State of properties, behavior. I hope now the idea of object orientation has become clear to you. Now the point is, how can we take a real world object and convert it into a JavaScript object, right? Because inside JavaScript also we have objects. JavaScript is certainly an object-oriented programming language, and object orientation is such an important concept without which you cannot survive in today's industry. Okay, so let's take an example, but before that I just want to show you, in JavaScript there are many ways to create objects. These words may not make sense to you, but eventually everything will, right? So one of the ways to create objects in JavaScript is called as the object literal notation. This happens to be the most commonly used way or approach. Another way to create it is using something called as a new object constructor, right? What it is, I'll show you. Another way is using something called as a constructor function, which now is a very old way to do things, but still it's good to know. And of course, the latest and greatest way is by making use of classes, which is the truly object-oriented way of doing this. But please try to understand, out of these four ways, these two you must compulsorily know, because the entire internet in a way talks to each other using something called as JSON or JavaScript object notation, which is very similar to what you're going to be seeing here. And I'm sure you've heard this word JSON before, and I will be going into the depth of JSON. Don't worry about it. Any which way, let's move forward and try to understand. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is, let us assume I have a car object. This is a real world car object. Every object has two parts, its state or properties and its behavior. In simple English, has and does. So let us assume this car has name, this car has cost, this car has mileage, right? Those are some properties. Of course, the list goes on and on. I'm just listing three. Similarly, in terms of behavior, probably it can start, it can accelerate, it can stop. Now, how do we convert this into a real world object? So please try to understand. I'm just trying to show you the syntax here, right? The syntax of creating a JavaScript object using the object notation or the object literal notation is something like this. It starts with parenthesis, and inside the parenthesis, what you call as a JavaScript objects are key value pairs. Are key value pairs separated by commas like this. Separated with commas. Key value pair, comma, key value pair, comma, key value pair, comma, like this. And at the end of this, there is a semicolon. This is how the syntax essentially looks like. Now, I'll give you more clarity on this and you'll understand it in depth. But let's go back to our car object. Now, how do we convert this into a JavaScript object, right? So for that, let me quickly bring up my editor here for your reference. In my editor, please try to understand, I want to create this car object. So see, start by putting parenthesis and put one semicolon. Inside that, first let's start with the properties, with the state, with the has part. Now, I want to create a property called as name and I want to give it a value. So how this works is key value pairs. The key is the name of the property. What is the name of the property? In this case, name itself. So see, name. Followed by a colon. Followed by what is the value you want to assign. Maybe I want the name of the car to be BMW, like this. This is my first key value pair. Now I will go here and I will put a comma. The next key value pair I want to create is the cost and its value. So the key is cost. The value is probably in Indian currency 75.6 lakhs, something like that. This is my next key value pair. Comma. Next, I want the next one, which is mileage. So I'll be saying mileage like this, and I'll be giving its value probably 8.6 kilometers per liter, right? So like this, you can create any number of properties that you want. Key value pair, comma, 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 you have to keep creating. Wonderful. But I have properties and behaviors. A real world object has properties and behaviors. What about behaviors? What about actions? That's handled using functions, I told you. Now, how do I create a function inside an object? Because an object is a logical grouping of the properties and its behaviors, right? So even the function should be created inside this itself. How will you be creating it? Watch it, put a comma, and I'll come here, I'll leave an extra line. See how you have to do. First of all, do you remember the syntax for function expression that I taught you? If somebody is watching the video for the first time, please go back and watch the entire series. I'm sure your clarity will improve. But for those of you who've been attending regularly, you know there's something called as function expression, right? So see, I'll say function. Okay, I'll not give a name. I'll put these parentheses. Next, I want to give its body. Now in the body, in this case I'll just tell console.log, and I just want to say car is starting, like this. Nothing great. Alright. Now the thing is, everything inside your JavaScript object, especially in the object literal notation, are key value pairs. Now the name of the function is the key. Name of the function is the key. Its declaration or body is its value. Understood? So I'll go here and see here, I'll put a colon like this, and what is the name you want? Start. So I'll call it as start, like this. I hope you're able to see. Understood? Wonderful. One way is you can bring this bracket after that parenthesis like this. This is one more way in which you can be writing. And now you want to create one more function. I'll put a comma here, and now directly I will write the syntax. Was it key value pair, right? So what is the next one you want? Stop. So see, the name of the function will be the key, stop. Next, I will say function, and I will give its body like this. Maybe I'll just copy this line, paste it here, change this to car is stopping, like this. I'll put a semicolon here, semicolon here. Understood, friends? Similarly, I want to create my last and final function, which is accelerate. So I'll just copy this entire thing. I'll put a comma here, and I will paste this. I will be changing the key to accelerate like this, and it's always best to leave a space before and after so that readability improves. Okay, and here I will say car is accelerating, like this, accelerating. Okay, accelerating. Okay, accelerating. All right, I don't know if my spelling is wrong, weak in English, please forgive me. Okay, any which ways, now the question is, this is my last key value pair. After this, I should not be putting a comma. Be careful about it. Okay, so you can clearly see, this is my first key value pair, which is my has part, name, cost, mileage. These are my methods of functions, right? Which is again the behavior of the object. So I have start function, I have the other one which is my stop function, I have my accelerate function. Great, but I'm sure all of you are able to see it's showing some kind of errors. Why that is because compulsorily every single function, every single object must and should have something called as a reference or a name. You should assign it to a variable. Otherwise, think about it. How are you going to access this car? How are you going to access this car? You should have some way to access it, right? And that is by making use of the variable that I'm going to assign, or the name that I'm going to assign, or the reference I'm going to assign. How are we going to do that? I'll go put an assignment here, and I will say let, I'll call this car as A. You can call it whatever you want. A, B, C, C1, C2, C3, X, Y, Z, your name, my name, any name, everything works. You can see all errors are gone. Understood? So the syntax is something which you must and should know. Start by putting parenthesis, semicolon. Next, inside that everything is key value pair, including the variables or the properties and the behavior or functions. Everything is key value pairs. Clear till here? Okay. Now we have created this, agreed. Now how are we going to sort of visualize this from the memory point of view is the next question, right? So let me just reduce the size a little bit so that I have enough space for my memory. Now everybody knows when a JavaScript program is executing, we have two memory segments that comes into play. One is called as the stack and another is called as the heap, right? I'm bringing stack and heap. Interesting enough, the stack was always the only segment which we were focusing on, and the heap was empty. The reason why the heap was always empty is because heap comes into play only when objects come into play. Otherwise, they don't even matter, because heap is a memory segment designed to create objects, manage objects, right? Anyways, first thing that happens in any JavaScript program is a global execution context gets created. The global execution context always has two phases. One is called as the creation phase, another is called as the execution phase. I am just showing creation phase here and execution phase here because you'll understand the reason. Earlier I was showing this here, that here. It's just a representation, don't worry. Am I clear? Now, first thing that happens is hoisting. Hoisting is the process of finding declarations, variable declarations, function declarations, and even object declarations. So now what you can see is, here you will see this is my variable. It is both getting declared and initialized in the same line. JavaScript will split it into two lines like this. I have explained this in detail. First thing that happens in the creation phase is that all declarations are created, in which case memory for A is created like this. Next comes the execution phase, and that is where all this has to be executed. So now JavaScript sees the moment you put parenthesis semicolon, it knows that programmer is trying to create an object. JavaScript knows objects have to be always and always allocated on the heap segment. So please try to understand, the moment you put bracket semicolon on the heap, one brand new block of memory is created for you, inside which our object is going to be forming, right? Now please try to understand, in order for JavaScript to easily identify, recognize and find this block of memory, every block of memory in our computer is always associated with an address. The address will look something like a hexadecimal number, very complicated to read. To simplify this, I will just represent the address as 1000. It's not like you'll find an address called as 1000 inside your machine, but I'm just simplifying it for you. So please understand, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon, new block of memory is created on the heap segment with an address. Is this much clear? Next what happens? Next what happens is, now JavaScript goes and says there are key value pairs. So what it does is, it will now go create one variable called as name and assign the value BMW to it. Next, it will create a variable called as cost, assign the value 75.6 to it. It will create a variable called as mileage, assign 8.6 to it. Now this, my friends, is the has part, the state or property of the object. I'm just making one imaginary partition here. Now in the second phase, it sees there are further key value pairs, but these are not variables and its values, these are actually functions. Understood? So now it knows that there should be a function called as start, there should be a function called as stop, there is a function called as accelerate. This, my friend, is a JavaScript object. An object is a real world entity which is created within a computer. I hope you will understand. An object will always have two parts, has part, does part. It will have properties, it will have behaviors. Wonderful. Is this much clear to all of you? Once this object is created, now this address 1000 is taken and it is given to A, it is assigned to A. Understood? And hence that 1000 now comes and sits inside A, which means now A is the holder of the address of the object, and hence from here a reference is created to the object. Why we call it as a reference is because it is a variable which is holding the address, the location of a particular point in your memory. That's why it's able to refer there. Only a person who has an address can point you in that direction, because it has the address is why it points to that memory. Understood? And this is so important because if this A was not there, there is no way for the programmer to access this memory because the programmer doesn't even know its location. That's why reference is important. Understood what I'm trying to say? So this is how objects are created. Yes? Again, I'm just scratching the surface of objects and object orientation in general. It's a very vast topic which we will be exploring in depth anyways. But just to kickstart things, I hope this much is clear. Now watch it all of you. Now that my object is created, I want to show you how to access it. Okay? So let us assume, I'll just go here now. And in this case, I want to now print the name of my car. How will you do it? I'll say console.log. Okay, now how to access? Watch it. I'll say A. The moment I say A, I reach here. That is 1000. Now I want to go inside the object. How to go inside the object? The syntax is the dot operator. You press dot, you enter the object. Inside that you have name, cost, mileage, start, stop, accelerate. I want to access the name. So what I'll say is, I'll say name like this, A dot name. Now the value of name is taken, given to the log statement, gets printed on the screen. Clear? Similarly, my dear friends, I want to print probably the cost, in which case I will just say A dot cost like this. I think you're able to get a picture. Okay, what if I want to say start the car? I want this start function to execute. This is again very simple, watch it. I will say A, I'll reach here. I will say dot, I will enter. Which function do you want to access? Start, I'll say start. How do you call a function? You know the syntax, you need to put the parenthesis. Understood? Obviously when you say A dot start, the start function gets called. Whenever a function is called, its own execution context gets created. Inside that again you have the creation phase, the execution phase. Inside the creation phase there is really nothing, there is no variable declarations. Inside the execution phase you have your log statement. The log statement executes, printing happens, you will get car is starting. Execution context gets removed, I come back to the global execution context. I hope you're able to understand how this works, right? So there's nothing new for you to learn here. Similarly, if in case I say A dot stop, stop function executes, I don't think I need to explain this to you. Now, really does this happen, and will we be getting this is the question, okay? So everybody should focus. I'll just bring up the terminal here itself, and if I were to just go and say node exmp.js, you can see 70 BMW is the name, 75.6 is the cost, car is starting, car is stopping, it works. Am I clear? So the point is, quickly I've given you an introduction to what is meant by object orientation, how a programmer has to rewire their brain and perspective to sort of look at the world so that they're able to see it as objects and map those objects into the program. Because ultimately we are creating software for the real world, for real people, trying to solve real problems. And in the real world, it is objects interacting with other objects, which is making everything happen, right? And hence being able to sort of make a virtual mapping of the real world interactions that you see around you between objects is the fundamental essence of what you call as object orientation. And I've shown you how to create an object in JavaScript and how you can be doing it, right? Now, as basically a task, what I want you to do is, I want you guys to try to create an object, okay? So let's take the example of a student. Again, student is an object, you have two parts, state properties and behavior. Let us assume a student has a name, a student has a grade, a student has a certain age, right? I can keep listing, I'm just giving you 3 examples. On the behavior side of things, behaviors are actions. A student can code, coding. A student can sing, singing. A student can dance, dancing. Those are behaviors, right? I want you to try to create an object successfully if you can, and I want you to pause and try it. Anyways, assuming that you have given it a shot, I am just showing you how that object would look like. Understood? If your syntax looks something similar to this, you have done it. Now, you must also be going and making sure that you try to make the mapping of the memory. And if you are successful in creating it, the memory mapping, my dear friend, would also look something like this. Understood? So this is something which you should have tried, but I hope I've been able to give you clarity. Thank you so much for attending this session. I hope your clarity on object orientation has improved. I will be going into the depth of OOPS, but not in this particular lecture. I have just given a basic introduction because I'm yet to give you complete clarity on functions. And what if I told you functions in JavaScript are also objects? Curious to know more? Make sure to catch me in the next class. Until then, I request you to just like, subscribe and comment. It helps the YouTube algorithm recognize us and recommend us to other learners such as yourself. Thank you so much. See you in the next class.